Hello, I'm John, and I'm an alcoholic. I want to start by saying glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Greetings from Lafayette, Louisiana. I'm in south central, centrally located southern United States. Was born and raised here in Lafayette, Louisiana. If you've ever heard of Cajun cuisine or Cajun food, we are the mecca of Cajun country in Louisiana and in the United States. About 2 hours outside of New Orleans, Louisiana. We have a very solid recovery community here in Lafayette, and I'm grateful that recovery is solid here. And we use the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous almost exclusively. So I want to start I'm going to do what Bill did. Bill, in my opinion, tells you what he is going to tell you before he actually tells you. I'm going to attempt to do that, have this session laid out, and these are some of the questions that were submitted to me from alcoholics in Ukraine. So session one, hopefully that translation works. I'm going to introduce you to, I've already talked about my life experience quite a bit, but I'm going to specifically focus on how did the military service impact my life before and after recovery. And I'm going to talk about the challenges of adapting after returning from war and how this affected my addiction. I'm going to talk about addiction while in the military service. When and how did I realize that it had become a problem in my life? And we'll talk about a trigger, if military service was a trigger for alcoholism, if so, how. And I'm going to talk about how alcohol and substances affected my service and my relationships with colleagues and job performance. And then we'll go to the bright spot, the path to recovery. I'll talk about what I believe my turning point was and when I decided to seek help. And I'm going to talk about AA and how it played a role in my recovery, how it integrated my experience into the recovery process, and talk about some mentors that I had and how they influenced my work on the program. You've heard a lot of my story, and, they say, we share what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I like to share in a very general way about what it was like because it's not so much the details of the story, it's the feelings and the realizations that we have that create a common bond. My military service impacted my life in all forms. I was very young when I entered military service. I was 19 years old and I'd never been out of the country. I'd only been a few states over and I never really put any roots down. I was always on the move if not every year, every other year. So I never put any roots down. I never got married. I didn't have a family, which I'm glad I didn't. Looking back in hindsight, I just wasn't ready for those things. Before I got sober, you know, during my military service, I drank to forget. And I'm sure I would have become an alcoholic had I not joined the military, just because I believe I'm genetically predisposed and I'm a more person. I need more, but I drank to forget a lot of times after deployments, after coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and drink to remember. But what's crazy is that when I would drink, sometimes it was all I could think of. It was insane. But after recovery, my military service has been a positive impact, something that I looked at very negatively. I resented the fact that I did that long in the military. After I got out, I resented it very much. In fact, it was almost number one on my resentment list. United States government, military, authority figures, they were all on my resentment list. When I came into recovery, I had to be rid of the grouch and the brainstorm. That's what the big book calls it. They're not for people like us. I did something for a period of time. I'm no longer there, right? And one thing I've learned in recovery is how to turn those things into a positive, or how would God have me be? So in my recovery, my military experience definitely became an asset. I had a pension, I had some veterans benefits I was eligible for, and I was able to turn those things to good account. I'm very grateful for that. Did I face challenges adapting after returning from war, and how did this affect my addiction? I think I would have become an alcoholic and an addict even without military service, but it definitely didn't help. every time I'd come back from Afghanistan, I'd drink and I'd use and try to forget things. The only thing I found that could turn it off completely was opiates. And you know, Bill talks about, being at the turning point, and he talks about wishing for the end. And I believe at that point I was just wishing for the end. I just wanted to die. I would rather die than to continue to live the way I'm living, and I'd rather die than to have to keep refeeling this pain. So yeah, I definitely had trouble adapting, and war veterans get a stigma. You know, your family doesn't know what to do with you. And they do say that the alcoholic leads a double life more than most. He has a certain reputation. He wants his friends to know. But he cringes to think about what he did on his binges. I was one of those people that did atrocious, terrible things. I would use PTSD or combat experience as a reason for it. The real reason was that I had a spiritual malady. And, I think it's a 50-50 between using it as an excuse and it added to my disease, it amplified it. And it gave me a certain leeway that, this is what a PTSD veteran does this. And I had these ideas, and I would more than live up to them. And, it could be an excuse at times, just looking back in hindsight. Let's see what else we got. Question number 2. Addiction during military service. I talked about that in my story. When and how did you realize that alcoholism had become a problem in your life? I was reading through Bill's story a little bit before this. Look, I'm not Bill, but I'm going to keep relating myself to the book of Alcoholics Anonymous because it's the most valuable tool we have. In order to recover, I have to get in line with the process in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I can tell you that book has become my truth, but I was reading about Bill's story, and I couldn't really identify much except for when he talks about, he was making millions of dollars in the stock market and everything was fine, and the drinking wasn't a problem. When everything was fine, the drinking wasn't a problem. But as soon as something went wrong in his life, he said, liquor ceased to be a luxury. I believe when I was medevac back to the United States, at that point in my life, liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became an everyday thing in addition to other mood-altering substances, but alcohol became my master then. When all my plans fell apart, that's when alcohol took the place of my plans and designs. My plan had failed utterly, and so alcohol became my solution. So I think around 2012, 2013 is when I truly realized that it was a problem. Was your military service a trigger for your alcoholism? I'll say yes. Military service and the camaraderie that comes around with that, or it being socially acceptable as a means to cope, definitely enabled it. I had an excuse to drink. I didn't need an excuse, but I had one, so I'm going to sure as hell use it. And yeah. So how did alcohol affect your service? I mean, I was a very young soldier, and I made, I wasn't a private any longer. I was a specialist in the Army, which was an E4. And one weekend, I got into some trouble drinking. I was underage drinking. I think I was 20 at the time. And I got in trouble underage drinking. Due to that incident, I ended up being reduced in rank. Had some consequences there. It definitely affected my relationship with colleagues. My supervisors would always see potential in me. And one thing that people say in the program here is people say you have potential, that just means you haven't done shit yet. And they definitely saw a lot of potential in me, and other things would always affect my service and my job performance. And being good at my job allowed me the luxury to drink. I could just get by, but people saw me when I was at my best, and they knew that I could achieve that. I just wasn't capable of doing it. at the time. And it definitely caused some fights, knockdown, drag out fights with bosses, buddies, because they're tired of picking up my slack, who are trying to mentor me into leadership. And I just can't fulfill the role that they believe that they know I could. I just couldn't leave alcohol alone. Yeah, it definitely affected my service. Late for shit. I'd wake up in other countries. I remember I was flying to Kuwait City. I was on my way to Iraq and we were flying civilian. I don't know why. I think we were a small unit, but we were flying civilian. So I'm in civilian clothes and I'm flying into Kuwait from Washington, D.C. to Kuwait. And I didn't know that there was free liquor on the international flight. So I pre-gamed a little bit and I was trying to bring more liquor on the plane with me. I drank, I was good and messed up, but I was trying to drink more on the plane. So I was like, well, let me make sure that they're not going to get all my booze. So I went to a fancy wine shop and I found, you know, not the cheapest, but close to the cheapest bottle of wine they have. I think it was called Menage a Trois. And because that was a wine I went to pretty regularly. And I bought 2 bottles and I asked them to pop the cork on them. They wouldn't pop the cork on both, but they would pop the cork on one to let me sample it. So I drank the bottle and I corked it back. I put it in my backpack. I'd already went through security, so I'm going on the plane. I got on the plane and the guy, and I'm like pulling out my bottle. I'm like, "Can I get a cup?" He's like, "No, sir, I can't just give you a cup. Wine is complimentary. Wine and beer and wine are complimentary on this flight." I was like, "Well, bring me a glass of whatever." And long story short, I ended up getting so drunk on that plane. Kuwait does not allow alcohol in that country. It's illegal. And I passed out on on the plane. It was like a 11, 12-hour flight. And I passed out on the plane. And the next thing I remember, they were waking me up. The plane's empty. And I have wine all over my clothing. I'm just soaked in wine. And they're like, you have to change. Like, I'm trying to walk in there. They're like, you can't go out, leave the plane like that. So they were nice enough to let me change clothing on the plane before I got out. So yeah, almost created an international incident. A soldier being arrested, in a foreign country probably wouldn't have looked good. Uh, so yeah, it definitely affected my career and my military service. Let's see, the path to recovery. Okay. What was the turning point when I decided to seek help? Well, shit, which time? Um, I will say that this last time, to me, this is the time that matters because I've been sober coming up on 4 years now. And my turning point was in my bed. I was laying in my bed and I'd burned my pants. I'd burned my bed and I just asked for help. I don't know what I asked, reach out to, but I asked for help. And and then there was another in the hospital is when I was very stubborn. Uh, in Cajun country, we call it a tête de, which means a hard head. And I definitely had a hard head. I needed a well whooped ass, is what they call it in a well whooped ass before I got sober. And I was in the hospital. My legs still weren't working. And it took me about 3 days of laying in the hospital before I was able to say, yeah, like I need to go somewhere. Uh, AA played a huge role in my recovery. I did go to I went to 45 days of treatment and I actually ended up working in that treatment center. Uh, about a year and a half later, they hired me on, but AA is by all means the most important pillar of my recovery. Um, AA was there. My family, both my grandparents have been sober a long time. My grandfather, who was in the military, who was in the Air Force, was an air traffic controller like me, died at 36 and or excuse me, died at 36 years sober. And my other grandfather, God willing, come July, he'll make 50 years. And I get to go and pick up a, a chip with him. I get to go watch him pick up his 50-year chip in July of this year, God willing. And so AA, I said, because AA has always been around. I never wanted anything to do with it. was a hard head. And, when I finally gave up, in fact, my mom reminded me the other day when I spoke, she said I had told my story and she said, all that from a guy who said, I never want to go to a 12-step place. Like, I don't want to do that shit again. And, my mind was closed off. When I did decide to seek help, I told him, I said, don't send me to one of those damn 12-step places, you know. And strangely enough, the thing that I was most close-minded to ended up being the most important part of my recovery. Um, so how did the program help you integrate your military experience into the recovery process? It's definitely been an asset. Um, the fellowship that is in AA, it's not like the brotherhood in the military, but it's we have a common bond that transcends all differences. And in the United States military, it's a very diverse group of people, all backgrounds, just like AA. The fellowship is people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, countries and languages, a lot of different people in AA, bonding on a common goal or a common experience or a common primary purpose, if you will, to stay sober and then to help the next alcoholic. I could definitely get on board with that a lot easier. In the military, we always had tactical orders like, here's our order of march, like here's our task. What's the purpose? Conditions, what's the standard? So like, we had some clear cut, usually, not always, clear cut goals at least to achieve. We didn't always know how we were going to do it, but we knew what we were trying to do. And in recovery, it's the same way to me. We have clear cut, precise instructions on how to recover from alcoholism. And, to accomplish that goal, I follow the playbook. I follow the orders, just as it's written, and no other method. And I'm able to stay sober when I finally give up on any good plans and ideas that I have, because those do not work well. Um, yeah, I was definitely able to integrate my military experience in the recovery process. It's definitely helped me to understand it a lot better. And did you have mentors who also had military experience? No, not the same military. Some had been in the military, they never deployed or went anywhere, they were during peacetime, but to be honest, one of the best things I ever heard, uh, was this guy from down South Alabama. He had a very thick country accent, and I was in treatment, and I don't remember what I said, but after I shared in our little group meeting we had there, he looked right at me, said, "You're not fucking unique." And it got my attention. I was kind of pissed. But, upon looking at, just because I have military experience doesn't mean I'm unique. I don't have any different emotions, feelings. My experience is different a lot of times. And, someone who's even just been, a recruit in the military can understand, we have a common understanding. And, but all these other people have the same feelings. And, it did influence my program a little bit. But I haven't had a specific military mentor. To be honest, I want to be, I want to move on. I don't, I, the service I did for the United States military was something I did. It's not who I am. Um, One of the biggest problems was, identity or the ego. My idea of who I am was continuing my alcoholism until it talks about spiritual terms. Honestly, ask yourself what these mean to you. And I had to honestly ask myself, what do these terms mean to me? What is a veteran? It's just someone who served in the military. That's it. There's no common, not every veteran in experience is the same thing. And it's just like recovery. Everybody has a different experience. They all have, for the most part, the same feelings, emotions, and resentments. So yeah, I haven't really had many military mentors. I know other veterans in recovery, and we are attracted to each other. not in a weird way. That's probably gonna translate weird. We gravitate, that would be the word. We gravitate toward each other because we know, but once an understanding is reached, until an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. It's kind of the same way with military service. I can usually tell if someone knows what they're talking about, within a few minutes or hour. The book says, that this man obviously knows what he's talking about, that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he's a man with a real answer. So when I do talk to veterans, um, I keep the military talk mostly to the benefits and how it can benefit them now. Like, I don't care where you went and what you did. Um, I care about what can we do today, and listen, when you're fresh out, or you're still under the threat of loss of life, oh, that's easy for me to say sitting on the other side, but I can tell you that recovery is possible for everyone. It just has to be in God's timing, not in yours. And yeah, I think I'll wrap it up there. I don't know how long this video has been. I'm going to continue on. I think I have 16 total pages. I'm going to record some different sessions. If you guys have any more questions, you can submit them to the group and they can forward them to me. And I hope to do a live recording right after the first of the year. So again, my name is John Flowers and I am an alcoholic. Glory to Ukraine and glory to the hero.